Yesterday was Tuesday, which makes today oh damn, it's back. Jayar Jackson's here.
What's going on? How you guys doing? I feel like we just did this.
What do you mean? Like
I
months
feel like
ago,
this was like yesterday that we just did the show together. Am I right?
Well, we did do a Friday, that is true. And we actually have an update on a story that we talked about on Friday. But in terms of actual Jayar here for a Wednesday, it has been several months. I heard you were doing something. I don't know exactly what it was, how you were filling your time over those months, but you've been gone for a while.
I was working on my car. I decided to be a mechanic for a few months and actually take some time off, reconnect myself with dirt, grime, and old oil. It was fun.
Exactly, sounds fun. Anyway, of course, Jayar hosts the Watch List every day. In fact, the Watch List just ended about 3 minutes ago. You can watch it every weekday in the hour leading up to the damage report. And then you got the damage report and then you got Indisputable. It's a news sandwich. That's what everyone is calling it.
So that means, John, you're the meat. You know, we're the bread, you're the meat. Is that what's going on with this news sandwich?
I don't make the metaphor. I just live by it. So
I'm uncomfortable
with
it already. So I mean, I'm ready to stop talking about it.
People love bread. Bread is very popular. I wouldn't worry too much about your position in the sandwich. Anyway, thank you everyone for being here for Big News Wednesdays. We've got a lot to talk about, including some interesting election results from yesterday. It was notably an election night that we didn't cover, mainly because it was like, as far as I can tell, completely irrelevant to progressives. There was some Republican races, which we will sum up. The big progressive, centric days, those are coming up in future weeks, including next Tuesday. So we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about acts of chalk-based terrorism. We've got hurricanes, guns, and a combination of the two, and then some interesting news. And we're gonna be closing off the show, like way in the future, with a sports story. We're gonna talk about sports. This is basically like, you know how like when someone like comes and stays with you, you're supposed to be really hospitable. Jayar's been off on a voyage for a long time. He's finally coming back. So this is the present I present to him as he comes back as a sports story.
I appreciate you. I'm actually afraid it's gonna be something like tennis that I only understand about 30% of.
Nope, don't worry about it. This is I could have brought up that I went to the Angel City football game. We could have talked about that, but no, this is like core to your interests, and you're gonna see in just a little bit.
I can't wait.
In any event, we got a lot to talk about. If you're on a platform that allows for liking, streams, or whatever, that would be great for the algorithm. And if you want to send us any comments, tweets, super chats, we'll respond as we go. But with all that said, Jayar, are you ready to do this thing?
I'm ready.
More importantly, do you remember how to be a guest on a show these days?
I don't. I keep wanting to talk over you, bro. I keep wanting to talk over you.
He's gonna throw to a cold open any second. But with all that said, why don't we transition into this? Last night in one of the Republican primary states, good news for us, bad news for Donald Trump at the same time. Now, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the results of the gubernatorial Republican primary off in Nebraska. You can take a look at this graphic and you'll see that Jim Pillen wins with 33.9% of the vote. Him winning isn't good news for anyone. He's a Republican, he's gonna be terrible. But he did beat, on the way, Charles Herbster. Down goes Herbster. Okay, now we've been talking about Charles Herbster a lot recently because we feel like it's insane that more of the terrible things he's been alleged to do hasn't made the news. And in fact, even in announcing the fact that he lost, Fox News attempted to gloss over all of that bad news, saying Trump notches a loss in Nebraska as Herbster goes down in GOP gubernatorial primary. That is all true. And like, fitting with the mission statement of Fox News, doesn't tell you any of the important part of the story. Because if you're not familiar with this, Charles Herbster has been alleged to have sexually assaulted 8 women, including multiple GOP legislators, on the record talking about their experience with him. Now, Trump initially endorsed him before all of this made news, but even after more and more came out, he doubled and tripled down because Charles Herbster, sure, he may sexually assault lots of women, but he also put Trump 1 on his bus. So I guess it's all good. And he was apparently back. He was there with Trump in the room way back in 2015 when he like slowly, weirdly came down that escalator. Charles Herbster was in that room. It was Trump, Herbster, and a bunch of paid actors. So anyway, Herbster did lose, probably because of those 8 women, including the state legislators that accused him. Trump told him to fight back aggressively using the same model that Trump has used when many women have accused him of raping and sexually harassing them. So he did the same thing, and Trump defended him, saying he's been maligned. He's been badly maligned, and that's a shame. That's why I came out here. It would have been easier for me to say I'm not coming out, but I defend people when I know they're good. He's a good man. Well, maybe not. And look, honestly, this is good news that he lost to Jayar. I didn't think it would happen. I thought the fact that he had harassed all these women would clinch the election for him. Although let's bear in mind, it was a very narrow loss. A couple of points.
I was looking at that. That's what I was thinking. Was it 3 points? Something like that, 3 to 4 points. So it was pretty close, which then, yes, we can congratulate this other bad person for winning. But then when it comes to this guy who has been accused of so many of these claims by these multiple women on the record, as you pointed out. You know what's weird is, you mentioned that Trump endorsed him before all these allegations came out. So the first thought could have been like, well, he already made his endorsement. What's he supposed to do? Maybe he didn't have that information. We're gonna blame Trump for the things potentially this guy did. But again, I feel like we're beginning to forget, not us here, but people in general are forgetting that the reasons why Trump can overlook these things is because he was accused of many of these same types of things. And skirted by talking about locker room talk and can you believe that woman's face? Why would I want to have anything to do with her? Oh my God, she's ugly. I don't think he went to the what was she wearing, but people were asking one of the women that's the alleged victim of Herbster what she was wearing. It's the same cycle of trying to discredit these folks for pointing out what potentially happened to them. Now, by the way, he also had an issue with Josh Mandel. Remember this? Remember the reasons why he didn't like Josh Mandel and he actually over in Ohio and he endorsed JD Vance over him? Because of his weird sexual proclivities. Rumors, by the way, because he likes to gossip around Mar-a-Lago about people's weird sexual proclivities. And apparently Josh Mandel's got too many for him to want to endorse. Herbster apparently doesn't have any weird sexual proclivities. He just has been accused of assaulting women. That's not weird at all. That's straight up the strong cisgendered male Republicans activity. That's just man being a man going after a woman, the boy chasing a girl. That's their thought of normalcy when it comes to sexual activity.
Yep. That's just alpha stuff right there. So Josh Mandel, as you said, had weird sexual proclivities, and also specifically one of the quotes was had a gross penis. That's a thing that, thank you, Donald Trump and your political movement for making us talk about gross penises. Now, presumably, we cannot rule out a possible other reality. If this was a multiverse, maybe if Herbster had sexually assaulted all of these women while having a provably gross penis, maybe then Trump would have retracted his endorsement. But for all we know, he's got a beautiful penis. And so he gets to go around assaulting all of these women, and Donald Trump loves him more for it. The electorate there nearly chooses him to be governor, and Fox News does what they do, which is to not serve as a news outlet, but as a filter to protect their snowflake audience from inconvenient truths. Like you could have said, Donald Trump, accused of assaulting literally dozens of women, loses after endorsing Herbster, accused of endorsing a good portion of a dozen women. You could have said that, that would have been news, it would have been true, but this is Fox News. So they ignore it, of course. Anyway, Donald Trump, by the way, hasn't said anything as of this morning. He's still silent about the fact that he lost in this endorsement. Now he won other endorsements, and look, maybe some of them might have been difficult. It might have been, that his endorsement actually mattered. In a lot of the cases, he's cruising in. He's choosing whichever no substance, no experience legislator is most deferential to him. That's the only thing any Republican voter has to go on, and so they just choose that person. But no, so far with Nebraska, that was a big loss, and maybe that implies that like maybe Herschel Walker won't win. I mean, Max Miller already did, and who knows what's going to happen with Greitens? Like maybe the Republicans will turn against some of these abusers. Jayar,
John, you're a positive guy, man. That's what I like about you. You always think of the positive, not about the reality. No, actually, I never really had a full belief that Herschel Walker would come through. But I mean, even with the positive numbers coming his way, I was just thinking eventually people would look up and finally go, yeah, this was fun for a while, but now really what is it he's gonna do? Because they do have critical thought process skills when it comes to black candidates. that are also garbage for what they may do once they're in office. But when it comes to their good old boys, we can overlook that, but they just can't get beyond some things. So they might see the flaws in Herschel.
Yeah. Well, there's some other races, by the way, that we're not there yet, but we can say Dr. Oz in a new poll is at 22% in the Pennsylvania Senate Republican primary, only up 2 points over McCormick. It's a pretty split field, but to be fair, I mean, I recall like a month ago, Oz was down. I think he was at like 10 or 12%, and Trump has endorsed him. So it's either that, Jayar, or it's did you see his ad of him shooting guns?
Oh, I loved it. I did that.
Dr. Oz,
wonderful. Yeah. I think that's what did it.
He's a tough guy.
I think there was the line. He goes, and if anybody thinks I'm not that's pro Second Amendment rights, I'll show you. Pull. So is that the idea, Dr. Oz? If you don't believe I'm for Second Amendment rights, I just might shoot something.
Exactly.
He's got
how many times, by the way, do you think they tried to just do a wide shot where he said that, turned and shot it in one shot? How many times do you think they tried that before they're like, we'll just do it in post?
John, I look at these kinds of details. I look at these details. Whenever does an ad, I think Charlie Kirk did a basketball ad. You see him shooting, and then all you see is the hoop and then it going in. Yep. Oh, because that's what really just happened.
I want to see the Office style deleted scenes of catch y'all on the flippity flip of him over and over trying to shoot it and missing. That footage is somewhere. Someone needs to leak it. A lot of races coming up in the next month or so of primaries that we should be worried about. One on the Republican side that hasn't really gotten enough focus yet is the fact that in recent polling in the gubernatorial race for Pennsylvania on the Republican side, this guy, Mastriano, is at 29%. So this is not done, but it's a good sized lead over the second place candidate right there. So why does this matter? Why is this something that we should be on the lookout for? Well, because this guy is a certifiable lunatic, and he could end up being governor of Pennsylvania, a guy who in future presidential elections could be influential in dealing with those elections and helping to determine the law and choosing his cabinet and everything. So here he is saying that he's going to appoint a Secretary of State who will force every voter in the state to re-register if he's elected. They're just gonna reset everything and try to kick off as many people as possible that might not realize until it's too late that they have to get registered. It might be difficult time-wise to get time off to. He's gonna try to do that. He also, by the way, organized buses to the January 6th rally. So that's cool. Him and Charlie Kirk could hang out and talk about how they got people there. He's not testifying despite being asked to. Oh, he also was at January 6th. If that's not clear, here's a photo of him talking with a guy who's running to be lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania. So the entire leadership at the state level could be people who participated on January 6th. He wants to do an Arizona style audit in Pennsylvania to decertify the election. The one from like years ago. He still wants to do that. Let's see, he started his campaign with a 4-hour event described as a political rally, rock concert, and Christian religious revival. Mike Flynn was there, who endorsed him, and then reassured the crowd that, quote, Jesus was a domestic terrorist. Now, why exactly that would reassure the crowd, I don't know, but I'm not crazy. They loved it for some reason. Also, he's gone to events, Jayar, promoting QAnon. He spoke at this event that claimed that the country is experiencing a great awakening, but don't be woke. Isn't that weird how they want to do the awakening thing, but they hate being woke? Anyway, and they'll expose ritual child sacrifice and a global satanic blood cult, which is just barely screened anti-Semitism. That's the guy who could be the next governor of the incredibly important swing state of Pennsylvania.
I have a question.
I have several. What's yours?
How seriously do the people who vote for people like this take all of these declarations and promises and calls for investigations and things we're gonna look into and changes we're gonna make and completely expel every voter in the state and then restart from the beginning? All this stuff that's barking to get Donald Trump to go, oh, I like this guy. Well, let me give this guy my endorsement. This is my guy. Because again, I went through many of the criteria that Donald Trump goes through to endorse folks. And the number one thing that you have to say is that the 2020 election was stolen. And if you say that, that's just not enough because all of them are saying it. You have to go further. You have to say, and what I'm gonna do about it is I'm gonna kick off every black person, every Latino off of the voter rolls because they're the ones who do all this voter fraud. You have to go further than that and say, you know what? Because all those folks have been molesting and murdering children. There's ritual child, what do you say? Ritual child sacrifice. You know what the child sacrifice is that we've been going through this country is allowing these guns to be taken into schools and then shooting up classrooms full of children. That's the child sacrifice that we've been going through that Republicans like this just don't give a damn about whatsoever. So again, my point here is that I don't think he's gonna follow through with any of this stuff. It's to get into power. It's just the way these things work. Because then how is he gonna pull this off? After the state turns on him for trying to implement these ridiculous policies, these cartoonish ideas, is he gonna actually be effective? No, the point is to get into good graces and get into office and then get to corrupting.
Yeah, and look, maybe in office in terms of his politics, he'll just be a regular Republican. He'll, block additional funding for healthcare and I don't know, try to give massive tax breaks to corporations to get them to come there. I don't know what he's gonna actually do. Maybe he'll do investigations into ritual child sacrificing, going on at the state level. I have no idea. But what I do know is we've been covering now for a couple election cycles. Will they embrace these people? Will it be a detriment? In 2020, several big QAnoners did win, Marjorie Greene and all that. But there were others that lost. It doesn't seem to be as big of a deal. I mean, again, like we were talking about Herbster, even like multiple allegations of sexual assault, narrowly squeaked it out. This guy's legitimately insane. He will definitely try to stop a free and fair election in Pennsylvania 100%. In the future. And there's a very good chance that he will be the Republican nominee. So very important that we get an awesome Democrat on that side to run for governor in Pennsylvania. Go do a little bit of research on that. Anyway, with that said, I also want to remind you, look, the news cycle is what it is. Ukraine is so significant, it takes up a lot of time. Obviously, with Roe v. Wade potentially about to be destroyed, that is something that we do have to pay attention to. We also have to remember that the Republican effort to shape the environment for the next presidential election, that continues. They are taking out county heads of elections. They are changing the laws. That is all going on week by week. We feel invested in all this, and we have to be because every one of these things that we cover is so important. But their activists, their lunatics, are not taking days or weeks off, and so we're gonna try to make sure that we're keeping tabs on all this. But this guy is just one part of an effort to shape the battlefield that's going to involve hundreds of new politicians and heads of elections and secretaries of state and justices of state supreme courts and all that. So everybody does need to start to prepare themselves for the electoral battles to come. And with that said, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, the worst news, the worst thing that's ever happened in American history is the protests going on right now outside of Brett Kavanaugh's house. And we're gonna give you updates after this. Okay, everybody, let's jump into some other news, starting with this.
And they should haul all of these people down to the police headquarters. They should book them for violating a federal statute. What they're trying to do is change the outcome of a Supreme Court decision, and they're doing it by showing force and intimidation.
Okay, so once again, you get to see a right-winger who is utterly appalled, not by Roe v. Wade being destroyed, but by the fact that a couple hundred people are protesting, and they would really, really love to have some footage of rioting and looting and fires and stuff. But what you saw is what they have. It's a show of force and intimidation. That's the show of force and intimidation. Very scary. I'm scared, and I'm not even there, Jayar. But anyway, that's Marsha Blackburn. She's freaked out about it. She is not okay with people trying to influence the Supreme Court to change its mind, to change, for instance, their position on Roe v. Wade. You do not try to change the Supreme Court's mind by peacefully organizing. You do it by creating a network of think tanks and then training up Republican lawyers over a long period of time, and then kind of hiding your actual goals culture war wise, and then gradually using the completely biased, structurally messed up system of governance to get some Republican presidents into office despite almost never being able to get the American people to actually support them. And then because you also have a biased outcome in the Senate, where even if Democrats get more votes, they'll almost never have the majority. You put forward conservative lawyers, they lie to the Senate and the American people about what they'll do. Then they get in office, get a conservative supermajority in the Supreme Court, and then they overturn Roe v. Wade, which they said they would never do. Jayar, that's how you change the Supreme Court's position.
I'm not sure why Democrats haven't figured this whole thing out yet. This is crazy.
It's
how
so
this whole
simple,
thing
it's stupid. Anyway,
it's like 2 moves and that's it.
Anyway, so here's the thing. She's ridiculous in that way. Also, what she said there was they should just round up all of those people peacefully marching. Just round them all up. Bear in mind, not that long ago, she was doing little videos on Twitter of, I support the rights of Canadian truckers to peacefully protest, which by the way, I did. I said that they could do what they're doing, but hilariously, she says in that video, if you track it down, the reason they're so justified is because someone's forcing them to get a jab or lose their job. And what she will not stand for is people's medical decisions being made for them by the government. Certainly not that, and certainly not having a medical decision be forced on you that you might then lose your job for. You know, like if you're forced to give birth by the government, the same government that, by the way, won't ensure any maternity leave whatsoever, and will leave you in a position where your employer could just boot you to the curb because you can't work for a few months. So that's fun, Jayar. This is all really fun.
Wasn't it her state that was making the mistake from the state legislators as they were debating whether or not they're going to have these laws as far as taking away people's rights? And they accidentally stumbled upon allowing people to marry children, as they talk about pedophiles and how the Democratic Party is hiding these pedophiles and their groomers and all this constant talk. But then they accidentally made that mistake of allowing that. And then when it was pointed out, it was, oh, we didn't see that. Moving on, because they just don't care. Similarly, we see the hypocrisy with Marsha Blackburn and who she does support as far as protests go and who she doesn't. I'm not sure if she's been come out vehemently against the January 6th protesters, but that one wasn't so calm either. Is she downgrading and demeaning that one? I haven't seen it.
You are 100% right. It was Tennessee that had a little loophole, whoops, accidental, that allows you to marry a kid. But they're very worried about pedophiles. Don't ever forget that. Anyway, so again, free speech, they love free speech. Oh, not your free speech, not you peacefully protest. I'm fine with you trying to break into a government building and trying to bludgeon to death cops with Trump flags and everything. But like marching down the street, come on. Is there no line? Is there no line, America? Susan Collins is appalled at what's going on out there. Not Roe v. Wade being destroyed, not her being shown to have been a fool to believe all these Republican potential justices saying that they're not going to overturn Roe v. Wade. No, she's losing it over chalk because she was forced Saturday night apparently to call 911 because someone had written in chalk outside of her house in Bangor, Maine. You can see a picture of it right here. Here is the we should have really blurred it, because if you look at that and you take the full force of that chalk into your eyeballs, your head could explode. Anyway, what does it say? It says, Susie, please, Mainers want WHPA, vote yes, clean up your mess. I'm sorry, we're probably gonna get in trouble for the language that I just used. Or can we bleep that out afterward? I wouldn't wanna run afoul of the censors. That is what she saw, Jayar, and it caused her to call 911. It literally has the word please in it. And she's terrified. What do you think? You're muted, by the way.
Damn, we gotta figure out that mute situation. I want the clicks to happen.
No, I've been doing it for years. It's fine.
I think it's because they called her Susie. So call her outside of her name, make sure she doesn't really not respected enough. And that's worth calling the cops over to make sure that people know that this sidewalk chalk. I wonder what happens if a kid runs out in front of her house and puts up, what do they used to draw? What was it called? Not double dutch, that's the jump roping. Hopscotch.
Hopscotch
boards out in front of her house. She goes, hello police, there's children out front and they have these weapons in their hands. It's actually rubbing off on their fingers. Oh my God, they're wiping it on their pants.
It's a powdery substance.
I want to say it because it used to stress me out. Yeah, I'm not sure if she thinks this was gonna get some kind of a positive attention, or as we mentioned before, Marsha Blackburn a second ago, they want to push this narrative that anyone that is protesting their stance and their points of view of taking women's rights are violent and angry, and somehow she thinks she can have this as an example. This should be laughed out of. Like, the police should have shown up and be like, "Can you go back inside now? In fact, we're gonna write you a ticket for wasting police officers' time." There's a charge for that. It's an absolute waste of time after they see the devastation that happened in front of her house.
Well, they did put out a message. A spokesperson for the Bangor Police Department says the message was not overly threatening. Yeah, no, it wasn't. And look, by the way, I don't want people to threaten violence against public officials. And good, that hasn't happened. That's not actually what's happening. Yep. They're not threatening the justices. So let's just continue with our free speech, which the right loves to performatively pretend that they actually care about. Clearly they don't. Whether you're marching kind of far away from their house or you're literally writing in chalk, they melt down over it. They don't care about free speech, even chalk speech. But to your point, why forget about this? Well, because let's say, Jayar, hypothetically, that your party, your political movement was about to do something unprecedented, incredibly politically dangerous to you because you know that the people don't agree with you. Wouldn't you want to make the news about something else? Last week it's about the leaker, not the leak. You can't leak it. And now they don't even care about the leaker anymore. Now they're under not the protesters, not the marchers. You can't march.
And all those things have to be exclaimed to this higher degree, like leak, leak, leak. Mitch McConnell said it openly. The story is not about what the Supreme Court is about to do. The story should be about these leakers. Hey, you tell your story, Mitch, and the rest of the country don't tell us what to talk about because it's obvious that you want to avoid that. Again, these Republican strategists and advisors always tell these folks, hey, you got to focus in on these culture wars, not about policy. The policy's out. We have to focus on the culture war part. Aren't these libs, aren't these progressives so violent to be upset that women's rights are being taken away from them? Can you believe them? Yes, I can.
Oh no, Jayar, we've messed up. Doggy Teeth in the chat says, I love TYT, but I will have to report this blatant airing of chalk. No, think about my family. Come on, I don't want to lose my job. Let's talk about not having votes for things. Now, Mitch McConnell is going to take what I'm gonna call the Sean Hannity strategy, which is the no, nothing's gonna happen. Why are you all pretending that something is gonna happen? We just fought for decades and decades to do this, and now it's happening, but nothing big is gonna happen. I don't really mean anything. This was just a goof. He's gonna say, remember that thing about we're gonna try to pass a federal abortion ban? Well, historically, there's been abortion votes on the floor of the Senate. None of them have achieved 60 votes. I think it's safe to say there aren't 60 votes there at the federal level, no matter who happens to be in the majority, no matter what happens to be in the White House. So don't worry, everybody. Don't worry. It ain't actually gonna pass. I mean, they would have to get rid of the filibuster to do that. And clearly, Mitch McConnell cares about tradition and norms. He would never run afoul of them, Jayar.
Ever. When Mitch McConnell promises he's gonna do or not do something, he follows through. When it came to him promising that he would do the same thing when it comes to Supreme Court justices, and when presidents are on their last year of their term, that there's no way we're gonna do this no matter what the party. And then the roles reversed, and he had an opportunity for it before it even happened, and he was asked, and with no irony in his voice, was like, "Oh, 100% I'd do it." I think he even had a smirk on his face, like, "Do you guys really think I was gonna follow through on what I said?" I'm Mitch McConnell.
He loves it. He loves it. Well, so don't worry, everybody. They don't have the votes later. You know what else we don't have the votes for? Codifying Roe v. Wade into law. And you're gonna say, wait, no, that was obvious. We know that they can't beat the filibuster. No, I'm not even talking about beating the filibuster. I'm talking about literally passing the bill, even if there was no filibuster. Because Manchin apparently says he really does want to codify Roe v. Wade into law, but he doesn't support the Women's Health Protection Act. That's, again, this isn't even like, can we possibly get him to overturn the filibuster? This is just, would you support the Democratic legislation? No, he wouldn't. And so here's what I'd like to see. Everybody grab your chalk and track his house down, track his boat down, track his Maserati down, and just near it, do a little bit of chalking. Leave a little message, maybe. I know it's scary stuff. I don't want to, FBI, back off. It's not me doing it. I'm just saying. Anyway, how embarrassing, Jayar. You can't even get 50 Democrats to support this. Is Sinema gonna support it? I mean, God only knows. I guess she's free to now because she doesn't have to be the one to turn against it.
But I wonder though, I mean, we got a lot of libs that talk about one thing we should do and we should do this and we should do it that way. But look, we still don't even have enough votes there, as you're pointing out. I'm not saying the effort shouldn't be there. But as we talk about the things that we should do, or at least force this vote and get people where they are, go ahead and point it out. We got a couple Democrats that are agreeing with Republicans against women's rights. It's just the way it is. It's the way it's always been. But we like to still hide those few people as if we're somehow circling the wagons and protecting them from these attacks. What do we need them for? In fact, they're more helpful to the Republican Party than they are to the people that actually voted them into office. What the hell do we need them for? There's no use. Point them out. It's not an attack on your party. They're attacking your party. They're attacking women's rights. They're attacking the agenda that you said is now being stalled by Republicans. Why can't we lump them in with the people that they're voting with?
Exactly, yeah. And if nothing is gonna be done, which it seems fairly clear that between now and the election, nothing is gonna be done. And once the election happens, because nothing's gonna be done, the Republicans are gonna take the majority. The argument that like, oh, well, Sinema and Manchin are terrible, but we gotta have them to have the majority, kind of becomes pointless. We don't really have a functional majority. So why not at least do something? Toss them out of the party, make a big speech. Sure, you might lose them, but you'll reassure tens of millions of Americans that you actually give a damn about any of this, that you care more about your constituents than you do about some of the most conservative members of your, like technically members of your caucus at this point. You could at least earn something by doing that.
We'll actually come out of this thing stronger. Moments like this reset. It'll take a while. People will calm down. People are, I don't want to be associated with that. This is a group within a group. And what this does, there'll be a rallying effect for a while where the country says we're better than this.
And Biden will help that, right?
Yeah, totally. He'll be maybe the best person to have, right? I mean, how bad can you get it for Joe Biden?
That's Lindsay Graham in the wake of January 6th saying, obviously we've gone too far, we can't have this. So wait, at least Joe Biden is coming in. I mean, how mad could you get at him? I don't know, Lindsay, how mad could you pretend to get at him as soon as you realize that the Republican Party wasn't turning against this pro-violence, anti-democracy movement in the party? So that, which has now been released, thankfully, shows who Graham was when he was worried in the wake of January 6th, but he's moving on. And my producers are pointing out that he's 70 years old, but they were using a photo of him from the 1930s or something there. That's their choice, it's not my graphics department. But anyway, Jayar, he thought that Trump had gone way too far, something needed to be done, and thank God we have Biden coming in. And what happened to that Lindsey Graham?
Now, that Lindsey Graham is still in there somewhere, but he shows up whenever he needs to show up, wherever he thinks that will help his political career, and whoever else he needs to hitch his own wagon to. We talked about this a little bit early because Lindsey Graham finds whoever he can to glom onto to make sure that he's getting his feed. He's one of those guys who doesn't, he can't provide his own meal. He has to feed off of someone else. Like, oh, are you gonna finish that burger? I'll finish that for you. Because it's the only way he gets his sustenance is to come off of someone else's own production of their political, I guess, careers. I'm not sure how much this has really helped him over the years, actually, as well, too, because he did say it would be a rallying cry in the country that says we're better than this. That's actually a principle. That's saying what you think about the character of the country. He can't say that out loud. The Kevin McCarthy tapes, he said all this stuff about how Donald Trump is destroying the country, and this can't fly. This is not who we are. This is gonna be upside down. Can't believe people aren't gonna go for this. Those are reality and actual principles that they can't say out loud. If you fight your hardest to make sure the tapes about you saying true things like these two say don't come out, that means you're more focused on making sure that the falsehoods come out. Isn't that upside down world? Should that be a disqualifying thought in the first place? I don't care who it is. I don't care if that's someone that's a member of your party, someone who you said thinks has the agenda that you have. Doesn't that make you say, I can't trust what he says? If I'm a Republican, I was like, I really don't know what Mitch McConnell is gonna say next. I do know what he's gonna say next. I don't know what Lindsey Graham's gonna say next. Because he has no principles. I can't trust him. Maybe he's gonna be suddenly for Roe. I don't know, because he says one thing behind my back and he says the other thing in public.
Yeah, well, you want to hear the next thing he's gonna say? Because he is worried. He's not worried that this reveals to him to be completely spineless and soulless, and he'll just go with the wind and whatever he needs to do to stay in office. No, he's worried that like people will hear that and think, hey, how come you changed? So he put out a statement through a spokesperson saying, the Joe Biden we see as president is not the one we saw in the Senate. He's pursued a far left agenda as president. What are you talking about, man? He passed the COVID aid. And then the bipartisan Republican dominated infrastructure bill, and there was some aid to Ukraine, which I think Lindsey Graham pretends he supports. So what was the other thing that he did exactly? What was the far left thing? I'm to the left. Why am I not happy? Lindsey Graham, do I look super happy at the state of our country after a year? What far left thing, Jayar, has he done?
It's the question I've been hoping they would have asked.
They won't. He maintained much of Trump's policies at the border. He briefly funded vaccination, and now they've given up on that. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
They don't.
Anyway, we have a little bit more from Graham from those days right after the 6th. Let's see if we can learn a little bit more about the senator from this.
He's misjudged passion. He plays the TV game, and he went too far here. That rally didn't help. Talking about primarying us, and he created a sense of revenge.
So that boyishly young Lindsey Graham there felt like there was this feeling of revenge building on the right, thanks to Donald Trump. That's what he's talking about there. And so again, it's not just Trump did a bad thing. We need to come back together, and I think Biden's the way to do that. He's getting our base to want revenge against us. And we already know, they'd already chanted, hang Mike Pence and all that. They'd already tried to kill members of their own party. And that, I don't know, Jayar, I personally think, if a movement I was a part of wanted me to die at a certain point, I'd get a different job. I think the idea take the cut and pay or whatever.
The idea is that he won't die because he's on the right side of it. They're going to selectively choose the right people to kill. Again, but in private, again, these are his friends, talking about his colleagues on the other side. He said more glowing things about Biden in the past as well, too. So that's his buddy, yeah. That's his friend. He actually likes the guy. He said all that stuff before, but he wants us to forget it when it comes to things like this. It doesn't have to add up as long as he says the right thing at the right moment. That's the epitome of being a Republican politician. Just make sure you say the right thing to the right group of people. And he doesn't want revenge to be a thing now. Too late, bro. Way too late. You got Donald Trump leading your party.
He was the one that was hounded in the airport after January 6th, right? And all the Trump fans yelling at him. Wasn't that Lindsey Graham?
It was, yeah.
I wonder how influential that was in changing his mind. I'm sure they must have thought. I thought, again, as Jayar said earlier, I'm a stupid, naive optimist or whatever. Oh my God, they're sacking the Capitol. This is gonna be bad for them, right? And I think Lindsey Graham thought that. Mm-hmm. He thought this will be bad. We're all gonna finally wake up from this and condemn Trump. And then he went to the airport and he was reminded, no, they don't care if Trump had gone in there with a broadsword and started decapitating Congress people. They're in it. They want that stuff. And he wised up pretty quickly there.
My last thought is the main difference between all these Republicans and Donald Trump is that Donald Trump did not underestimate the violence of their supporters.
Yeah,
the rest of them said, we can play this game constantly. They're not really gonna do it. Donald Trump says they better do it because that's what I want them to do. He's playing them for who they are and using them for who they are. The rest of them are like, this is great. Lindsey Graham said it. He goes, he's a consequential figure in the Republican Party because he gets people fired up. Once I discover that he gets people fired up, I'm all on board because that's all he cares about. He doesn't care about what they're gonna do. Donald Trump cares about what they'll do because it's gonna help promote him and push his crazy policies and his goals of being a dictator.
100%. Okay, we're gonna take our second break. When we come back, hurricanes. Who's sending them at us? We'll dive into it after this. Okay, now that we're back into the actual show, I wanted to read a couple of the little nice podcast reviews on Apple Podcasts. We have a great audience over in the podcast world. And one of them said, this was the title for their comment. No, Brett, And the comment is a bit too much TMI, Brett. I don't know what that's a reference to. It could be almost any story with Brett. Thanks, Brett. That's now permanent in our customer reviews. Anyway, Abba Zaba just said title, nice. Review, nice. Nice. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyway, if you listen to TDR as a podcast, that's great. Thank you. Please go and rate and review it as well so that more people can discover it. We can, maybe notch some wins in the near future as a movement. Wouldn't that be great? Okay, with that said though, why don't we jump back into the news starting with this? We've known for some time that former President Donald Trump's got a weird thing for hurricanes. He also apparently thinks that China shares his obsession with them and perhaps has developed technological mastery over these phenomenon. Apparently near the beginning of his time as president, he had a pressing question for his national security aides and administration officials. This is not like a random comment. This is in meetings with actual aides. Does China have the secret technology, a weapon even, to create large man-made hurricanes and then launch them at the United States? One former senior official said, I was present once when he asked if China made hurricanes to send at us. Trump wanted to know if the technology existed. One guy in the room responded, not to the best of my knowledge, sir. I kept it together until I got back to my office. I do not know where the then president would have heard about that. He was asking about it around the time, maybe a little before he asked people about nuking hurricanes. So he thinks that they are brewing up hurricanes and then sending them at presumably the west coast of the United States, which as we all know, big hurricane territory. Or does he think that they're like making them off the coast of China and then hucking them over China, over Europe, so that they can then cruise towards the eastern seaboard, Jayar? I don't know, but he is one of literally the craziest people in the history of our species.
It made me have to open up a map and expand out to see the United States to China. I was like, I'm make sure that I'm right about this. It'd have to be sent from, I guess, the coast of China, past Japan. I assume maybe it can miss it if it makes a nice loop across the entire.
They bend it like Beckham around Japan.
Yeah, around the entire Pacific Ocean for that entire trek until it gets to the United States of America. Now, are there any factors as far as weather as it goes across? Have the Chinese thought of this whole thing? Are they so amazing in their inventions? They invent this man-made hurricane that can travel across half the world over a huge ocean just to get to the United States of America and be unaffected by anything else that gets in its path. Any other weather patterns, any other kind of creation, water. None of that changes anything because the Chinese are so good at this. If they're so good at this, man, we need to figure out how they pulled this off because we're behind. Way behind.
Exactly. We could use some more rain here in California every once in a while. We need to license this technology. Okay, so you're right. Wouldn't weather knock it out? Well, if it didn't, remember, he kept asking about whether we could nuke hurricanes to dissipate them, which again, just so crazy. We shouldn't have to. But here's why this becomes even more concerning. Donald Trump believes that bad things come from China and are sent purposefully to us. Okay, he believes that with hurricanes apparently, or at least is curious. He believed that with COVID. And he wants to act accordingly. As president already, he took a number of different steps against China. What this has to do with that is, he said, if they were to be sending hurricanes, would this constitute an act of war? And could the US retaliate militarily? He repeatedly asked about this, according to two different former senior administration officials and a third person briefed on the matter. They did say it was almost too stupid for words. No, it's not almost. It's too stupid for words. I did not get the sense he was joking at all. So he believes that they're doing it despite no evidence or reason to believe it, but he sees it as potentially an excuse for military action against China, Jayar. And that's where it goes from just something that's sort of ridiculous and laughable and below what should be a minimum level of respect in politics, to something that is concerning, because we know he wants some sort of tension, some sort of conflict with China, and he apparently is willing to use even science fiction justifications for it.
Well, we're hearing about how Trump decided to run the military on his own, as he pointed out. Again, these books are revealing all this stuff. But if he was running the military on his own, why weren't these things developed? How come we didn't go to nuking hurricanes? Why haven't we tried to catch up with this technology from China and that everyone's targeting us? Man, these are the ravings of a scared madman. If you think the entire world, they're all hell-bent on finding new and cartoonish ways of attacking the United States of America, because the United States of America is just so pure and open, and the bad guys have to come for us in all these different ways, of course you're gonna think about new ways to find a way to attack them first. He has to come up with this in his own brain, because he's itching. He's like, this is way too boring. It's like hundreds of thousands of Americans are dying of this virus that I'm completely ignoring. We need something else to happen. How about we bomb someone? It's like he needs to get excited. He's like a crazy child who was given, some weapons, and he went across the neighborhood and is gonna figure new ways to hurt people with it. And that's not an exaggeration. And enough people apparently stood in his way and didn't do anything about it, though.
Yeah, and they will not be brought back for the second time around. And he is desperate to use a nuke for literally something. Doesn't matter if it's fictional or not. As the Half Black Reaper points out, advice to Trump: hurricanes are an act of war, but they're an act of war from Poseidon, not China. He apparently didn't learn his history. Anyway, with that said, Jayar, I want to make sure that
Poseidon's with the oceans. Maybe it's tsunami and not a hurricane. I don't know. I forget my Greek gods.
Anyway, with that said, why don't we jump into an update for a story we talked about last Friday, starting with this.
Tonight, just released police body cam footage shows the moment Casey White is taken into custody, ending a nationwide manhunt. This video shows the chaotic moment authorities in Indiana caught Casey and Vicky White after a brief chase ended with their getaway car flipped on its side. Investigators believe Vicky White shot herself as officers closed in.
We could hear her on the line saying she had her finger on the trigger. Shot victim. Female is still armed.
So this is obviously a very dark ending to a story, a sort of shocking surprise story that began at the beginning of last week of Casey White, who you saw in that video, and Vicky White, not related. Her using her position as a corrections officer to help spring him from jail. They then went on the run, and we're gonna give you the details. We'll put up a photo to remind you of these two. Jayar, we had talked about the initial search for them. I was pretty dubious about whether they'd be able to find them, because I thought she knows law enforcement a little bit. They've got a lead and everything, but they tracked him down relatively quickly, and it ended in tragedy with her apparently shooting herself, according to what they say, narrowly avoiding a shootout with the cops. The cops at least say that they think that was the plan. What do you make of this?
It's sad. I remember from the beginning when we were talking about this, and there was the speculation, and I think it was fine to speculate that she's potentially a victim rather than accomplice in this. It's fine to assume that, because you'll find out the truth soon enough, and they did, and they discovered that she's part of this whole thing, which ended this way. And I think what stood out to me, and I feel like I mentioned it, maybe I just thought it. Anytime you have corrections officers or police officers that have gone rogue or gone to the criminal life, they definitely don't want to go to jail. That's what they do know, especially people who work in prisons like she did. She's like, oh my God, there's no way I'm gonna go to jail. That's a horrible place to be, and would rather kill herself than do so. Again, allegedly is what they said has happened. Kill herself rather than go there, which means a lot. So I'm curious. I'm surprised that they're still in the country. She sold her house for like significantly less than what it was worth. For them to have some money, you think they would have been off somewhere else by now. Apparently, they're not as smart as they thought they were.
Yeah, I mean, look, it immediately seemed like a horrible decision, a horrible plan, and it ended up, in some form like you might have predicted. And yeah, they didn't get far. They drove 100 miles before dumping her Ford Edge. They got a pickup truck. They drove another couple 100 miles, and then that was pretty much it. Their car got rammed off the road into a ditch. She apparently shot herself. They said they were shocked that they would have stayed in a community like Evansville for 6 days, but apparently they were just too terrified that they would get caught, and they were right to. They were found on surveillance footage, I believe, at a car wash, and tracked down relatively quickly. So, I mean, there's no like good person in this story. It's just the whole thing just
they washed their car
needless and
while on the run.
I know. I guess that was one of the last things that they would do as free people, unfortunately. Okay, with that said, that is it for our first hour. If you're on the linear platforms or on our podcast, thank you for listening. If you're on the podcast, please head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the podcast. It helps us a ton. But if you're watching one of our other platforms, we've got a lot more news to get to. So we're gonna take just a quick little couple-minute break, but hold on to your butts, because Jayar will be back after this. Seymour Demonic has been a member for 8 months, says, as a member of the LGBTQ+ community, I look forward to you guys keeping me sane and hopeful during the tremors to come for us folk Also, hi, Jayar. Hey, Jayar. And we can't take his shot. There's some tech insanity going on in that studio right now, but thank you. Oh, also, I don't think that we formally announced this. I don't have the details for you yet, but we are going to be doing a like a Pride special coming up next month. So we'll have details on that soon. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.